Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start building out on the body. Let me open up my outliner for 1 second. This was the original version that we were quad drawing with, which I duplicated to show you guys over here. It's working out quite nicely. And this mesh, in my mind, is kind of textbook. Like I'm doing a few things very standard. Notice the edge here that I established that encompasses the nose and the mouth. Notice that there's an edge loop that encompasses just the mouth. And, you know, I even have a pretty easily selectable edge for the nose. And of course, one of the most important ones is a patch here for the eye. And, you know, and so forth and so forth. And then, of course, my biggest patch of all, or my biggest boundary, is this edge right here that encompasses the entire face. So I'm kind of framing it. And so I'm constantly thinking about that stuff as I go. But like I said, we'll talk more in detail about that stuff in class. So now I'm going to go ahead and start building out on the body. And what I'm going to do, instead of selecting the original one and entering quaddraw on this one, I'm actually just going to create a fresh one. But first things first, let's create the mesh. And let's go ahead and make it live. And now, instead of selecting the original one we were quad drawing with and beginning with that, I'm just going to start clicking. I enter quad draw, start clicking. And now we're basically going to start thinking about this body. So the first thing I want to do, just kind of analyzing the detail that I have up here for the clavicle, I'm going to essentially make a ring around this area, very distinct ring. And that's going to be my border of what's essentially going to work its way up into the neck. But let's go ahead and build down on the torso. So I'm just kind of envisioning a center line, working my way down. Let's go to about there. And now I'm going to start picturing that transition into this leg. So I'm thinking about how this all might flow together. And I want you to see something that I do here that makes things relatively easy, or easier at least. You can see that the shape of the body, for the most part, is really, really simple with this character. I'm not doing anything too crazy. So I'm going to start building this out. Just like that. Now, before I continue, let me hit the move tool for a second. And with this new mesh I'm creating selected, I'm going to go into Windows, General Editors, and then where you see Hypergraph Connections, I'm going to select that. Let's go ahead and remove the history, but most importantly, when I quad draw, I tend to break this shading group connection because that's one of the things that bogs it down. So I'm going to select all of this right here. So again, when this mesh is selected and I go into Hypergraph Connections, where I see the initial shading group and the shape node for this, I'm going to select all this right here and just remove that. And essentially what that does is it basically makes it an unshaded piece. So if I isolate it and try to go into shaded mode, it's just going to look like a wireframe. So everything else is shaded, but this is actually not. It's just a wire. Okay. So that's going to keep it nice and speedy as we're quad drawing. So I'm going to select it back, hit quad draw again. And now you'll see that these polygons get generated much, much quicker, which is nice. Okay. So when I'm making when I'm making the connection or like a torso area, one thing that I like to define as best I can are rings for those areas where the arms and the legs basically get inserted or transition into the body. So I'm going to go around here and I'm just kind of envisioning where all that might be. So you can see that this is a ring for that leg and how it gets attached. This right here is a ring for the arm and how it might get attached. And then I'm going to start filling in the blanks around it. I like to kind of mimic anatomy a little bit as I do this part, simply to just kind of assist the mesh in creating certain forms for muscle structure that I think is, from a rigging standpoint, it's really nice to have indicated. So here you can see that initial loop. That's basically the beginning of the arm. And here's one that's basically the beginning of the leg. So, you know, the plan is starting to work a little bit. Like I'm starting to see some of these bare necessity areas come into life here for me. Let me start to close off. So notice there's a big difference in how I'm treating the body from how I was treating the face. In the face, I was a little more conservative and very exact about how I was placing points and making the polygons, for the most part, larger. But here in the body, making them smaller. But here in the body, you see me kind of really making these big, broad shapes for these polygons. And the reason for that, and it is intentional, it's because I'm essentially trying to create as big polygons as I can, and I'm going to allow the tool to basically fill in the blanks for me. So what I'm doing here is just accommodating some space because I'm going to drop some stuff in there. Let's do the same thing over here. Just get ready to accommodate some space. It's feeling pretty good overall. Okay, so now let's start building down on the leg. Just going to quickly go down the leg by generating some pretty broad. Now the cool thing about characters like this, I mean, even though she's an obvious humanoid character, you know, there's enough anatomical detail. I do want to be specific with that stuff, but I could, you know, I don't have to be too crazy with the topology and trying to mimic like real anatomy. You know, the shapes are clean enough. Okay, let's work our way down here. And you know, just like you guys, I do intend to have this character completed by the end of the class. I want a nice piece for my portfolio too, man. If I can get it done with my crazy schedule, then you guys definitely can get it done. That's my 2 cents. Okay, so look how broad this is. And now check this out. So I have that in place, and now I'm just going to start insert. I'm holding down control, and I'm just inserting some edges. And what's awesome about that, look how it conforms to the mesh. It conforms to the shape of the skin. This is absolutely fantastic that I can do that. Now I'm going to reserve introducing 2 here, because what I want to do is first build out the arm. But I can go ahead and most definitely introduce some more here on the torso. And I'm being very liberal with the amount I'm dropping in place, doing that all on purpose. Okay, so now let's go to this arm, do the same thing that we just did to the leg. And once I finish this area, we'll conclude this recording. The main thing I really wanted to kind of picture for you guys here, or paint a picture of, was just this process more in practice. Now, one question you guys might be curious about is, well, how long would this take a professional to do? And, you know, obviously for myself, I mean, I've done this quite a few times. If I was trying to do this at work as an assignment, I'd be done in 1 day with a very thorough pass at this. So, you know, that means everything. And I mean that. There's no reason why you can't finish a topology pass on a character in 1 day. If you have a nice full day to work on it, and it's this level of complexity, which is not the most complex character, then this is definitely a 1 day scenario. So here I'm just kind of accommodating space and replacing certain points to rest on the mesh a certain way based on whatever little subtle anatomy I have. So here this kind of helps me shape that trap, that shoulder muscle there. So I'm going to start, not trap, what is that, deltoid. Sorry about that, guys. Let me get my names right here. And now let's go further out to here. So what I'll do is hopefully by Tuesday night's class, I'll have a completed model here as far as the skin is concerned. And all you guys hopefully have gotten your sculpts to a place where you have already taken a stab at this. I really, really want to see that happen. And if that is in fact the case, we'll start talking about how do we create clothing and all the excess stuff that comes along with your characters. Let me just finish a couple more thoughts here with this, and we are just about done with what I wanted to show you guys. Hope that was exciting. Okay, so here I've gone and, you know, really just built out the torso and the legs pretty quickly. Now the last thing that I'm going to do here is, well, some of you might have guessed it, I'm going to basically go and do a nice relax to all this. Before I do so, I like to make sure I'm given a healthy dose of resolution. It's nice to really flood this thing properly. And once I do that, I'm going to hold down Shift, start relaxing this out. Really get this mesh nice and clean. It was a pretty straightforward process. I hope for you guys to see, and just have fun with this. Okay, we have plenty of time to get your guys' characters done. There's a reason we're working in this manner of just one character, and it's because I really wanted you guys to focus on this workflow, and I didn't want you guys to be rushed with a whole lot of stuff. So there you see I just built that out. Now if I exit this for a second, let's go ahead and turn off live mode on the mesh. I'm going to duplicate this, move it over. Now let's assign it a material. And there's the makings of my body. So you can see in the time frame that I've been doing this, I've got a pretty solid foundation for the face, solid foundation for the arms, torso, and leg. And of course, the next logical step would be to connect the dots between the head and the neck. Well, obviously finish the head and the ears and all that good stuff, and connect the head and body together, and start building out on the hands as well. Really just get a nice simple topology to function for the hands and the feet. Okay. All right, guys. I'm going to stop it at that. Here's what I really hope to see by Tuesday. We've been living in ZBrush for quite some time. So actually, let me just pause this for a second. I'll turn on the camera.